By 332 BC, Alexander the Great was 24 years old and had never lost a battle. He was systematically dismantling the Persian Empire, the most powerful political entity the world had ever seen. This map shows the scale of his ambition. Alexander intended to seize a territory stretching from the Mediterranean coast to the borders of India, governed by a Persian administrative machine that had been entrenched for 2 centuries. After defeating the Persian emperor personally at the Battle of Issus, Alexander turned south along the coast. He needed to capture the Phoenician and Egyptian ports to neutralize the Persian navy before he could safely march into the heart of Asia. During this march, he sent a delegation to Jerusalem with a set of non-negotiable demands. He required supplies for his army, military reinforcements, and an immediate transfer of all tribute and loyalty from the Persian king to the Macedonian throne. Jadis, the high priest of Jerusalem, faced a perilous dilemma. He had sworn a sacred oath of loyalty to the living Persian king, Darius III. Because an oath made before God was considered unbreakable, Jadis refused to transfer his allegiance while Darius was still alive. This refusal prioritized a spiritual commitment over the immediate survival of the city. It placed a population of priests and farmers in the direct path of a commander who viewed resistance as an invitation to total destruction. Alexander was furious. He vowed that once he finished his campaign against the coastal cities, he would march on Jerusalem and make a severe example of its leadership. He had already proven his capacity for brutality. The island city of Tyre had resisted him for months, so Alexander built a massive land bridge across Greece to reach it. After a 7-month siege, the city was crushed. When the city of Gaza also refused to surrender, Alexander responded with a 2-month siege and total slaughter. He reportedly had the city's governor dragged behind a chariot to death, signaling that he would not tolerate even the smallest delay in his conquest. With Gaza taken, the road to Jerusalem was clear. Alexander led his battle-hardened Macedonian army toward the city, intent on punishing those who had dared to uphold their oath to his enemy. This model of the Second Temple illustrates Jerusalem's vulnerability. Unlike the island fortresses of the coast, this was a city of pilgrimage and prayer, with a clear lack of military fortifications or a standing army capable of meeting the Macedonians in the field. As news of Gaza's fall and Alexander's approach reached the gates, the population of Jerusalem was gripped by terror. They had witnessed the systematic destruction of every city that had defied the Macedonian king. Jadis responded by calling the entire nation to a solemn fast. The people gathered for collective prayer, seeking divine protection from an army they could not hope to defeat with iron or walls. According to the account preserved by the historian Josephus, God appeared to the high priest in a dream. The instruction was unexpected: do not prepare for a siege, do not hide, and do not offer bribes. Instead, the priests were told to decorate the city with garlands and open the gates wide. The citizens were instructed to dress in white garments and march out to meet the Macedonian army in a festive procession. Jadis was to wear his full high priestly vestments, including the blue robe hemmed with golden bells and the breastplate set with 12 jewels.
This strategy relied entirely on religious identity. Jadis chose to confront a violent military force with an unarmed parade, meeting a conqueror's wrath with a holy procession. On the morning of Alexander's arrival, his soldiers marched toward the city, fully expecting the order to plunder and kill. They had seen the king's anger and were prepared for another slaughter. But as they reached the final hill, the city gates swung open. A quiet, orderly line of white-robed priests and citizens walked out, led by the high priest in his vibrant blue and gold robes. When Alexander saw the procession, he signaled his army to halt. He dismounted his horse alone and bowed before the high priest of Jerusalem. His general Parmenion stepped forward, stunned by the display. He asked why the man who had brought the world to its knees was now kneeling before a Jewish priest. Alexander replied that he was bowing to the God the priest represented. He explained that before he had even left Macedonia, he had seen this exact man in these exact robes in a dream. The vision had told him to cross into Asia confidently, for he would be conducted to a total victory over Persia. This supernatural recognition stopped the Macedonian advance. Jerusalem was preserved because the specific imagery of the high priest's garments matched a vision Alexander had seen years earlier. Alexander entered the city as an honored guest. He was taken to the temple, where he offered sacrifices to God according to the directions of the high priest. While there, the priests showed him the Book of Daniel. This sacred text had been written over 200 years earlier, during the Babylonian exile. They pointed him to a vision in chapter 8. A two-horned ram, representing the Medo-Persian Empire, is attacked by a single-horned goat from the west. The goat moves with such speed that it never touches the ground before it strikes the ram and tramples it. The text explicitly identifies the goat as the kingdom of Greece and the large horn between its eyes as its first king. Seeing himself described in an ancient Hebrew prophecy deeply affected Alexander. He became convinced that his conquest was a matter of divine destiny, scripted centuries before his birth. Because of this encounter, Alexander granted the Jews total religious freedom. He exempted them from taxes during their Sabbath years and allowed them to continue living according to their own ancestral laws. This treatment was unique to Jerusalem. When the neighboring Samaritans attempted to manipulate the king for similar privileges and later resorted to betrayal, Alexander responded by colonizing their land and crushing their leadership. By granting the Jews special protections, Alexander integrated the Jewish religious world into his expanding Greek cultural empire. Over the following centuries, the Greek language became the common tongue across the Mediterranean, and the Hebrew scriptures were eventually translated into Greek. This ensured that Jewish monotheism and prophetic texts were accessible to the entire Greek-speaking world. This fusion of Jewish scripture and Greek language created the cultural framework that would later allow the writings of the New Testament to spread rapidly. The survival of Jerusalem ensured the preservation of the texts that would eventually define Western history.